So the first question to start off, which I think it's an obvious one, is how did this show come to be what it is now as we see it?
I wanted to have an intimate show. Okay. And sometimes everything gets narrowed because we have a four-sided painting. Mm-hmm. These aren't octagons, they're not weird morphic shapes, it's not a huge mural. We're limited to that little window that I'm showing you. And a lot of people know my paintings from big, huge canvases where you can kind of stand in the canvas and look right to left at it. It's not intimate. You're in the paintings in your peripheral vision. Well, here I narrowed that vision down. The only painting that's large is really the one behind me, but most of the paintings were under 16 by 20 intentionally, so that I could give the audience that intimate interaction. A small painting forces you to walk towards it. Because otherwise, if you're looking at a big painting from across the room and you glance and you're like, yeah, big painting, like it, whatever, pretty, and you keep walking, right? That kind of indifference, I didn't want. I wanted to have these little detailed sections so that you would be forced to walk up and investigate it. What is that? It's 6 people standing there or whatever, I think I have to go back to my mother passing away. My mother passed away in 2013, 2012. It was right on, it was December. So, and her funeral was in January of that year. And it was tough. I was really close to my mother, and I actually held her when she passed away. She died in my arms, and in fact, I put my right ear to her chest and heard her last heartbeat, which came a little bit after when she left her body. I could feel her leave her body and all that, and passed right through me. And I never experienced pain like that. I got to be honest with you. So with my mother passing away, my sister and I and my father, we were all kind of licking our emotional wounds from that. And my dad came up with the idea of going to northern Spain, going back to our roots. Now our roots are in southern Spain, but he came up with the idea of walking the Camino de Santiago, which I knew about. And my father's a Franciscan friar, so he's a lay monk and the Fourth Order. And so this is part of his Christianity, part of who he is. I'm not Christian or Buddhist nor anything. I take a little bit from all faiths and kind of sew together a tapestry of truths for myself. And a lot of that came from just being in northern New Mexico and being part of the Native American world, the Pueblo world, and that's all the story there. But my dad needed help on this pilgrimage. He has Parkinson's, and he's in his mid-70s, and so I obliged. I went with him on this pilgrimage. So I went and walked the Camino, and during that walk I did a lot of little studies, little gouache, black and white studies. You can't carry that much with you. Any little bit of weight is going to be on your feet and on your ankles for hundreds of miles, So I just made these little tiny paintings. And it wasn't until I had gotten back that after months I figured out what the narrative would be for the show. I'm a landscape painter. A lot of people know my work through landscape, Western landscape. And I thought, no, I don't want it to be a landscape show. I want it to be like a humanscape, something, more of a spiritual scape, if that's even possible. I wanted to get a little bit of the nightlife, which is what people know my work for. A lot of people know my work back in the day with my big kind of urban nightscapes, and really starting that genre here in the West of that kind of nightscape realism. And what I also call artificial light sources, using artificial light versus natural light. And So there's a lot of that. And the villages, you walk through so many of these little villages, and each village is like its own little tunnel of activity that you walk through, you know, almost like a little canyon of activity. And so I wanted to show that even more than I wanted to show the open landscape, you know, what that is like. I didn't want to be that predictable with the show either, with showing, you know, the big Randy landscape thing, you know. I wanted it to be the little capsules. So thank you for noticing that. That's really cool.
Yeah. I thought it was very, very obvious. But could you now at least walk me through kind of the process of, because as you said, you had these little sketches, these very rough ideas of what these eventually would turn into. Can you walk me through exactly how that sketch turned into these paintings?
Yeah, there's a photo of me over here right as you come in of me working on a little piece. And I would find myself in a doorway or propped up against a tree somewhere in the evening, and I'd just kind of sit there and I'd have this little painting, and I used a credit card, actually my Safeway card, as my palette, you know. So I'd had white on this side and black on this. So I'd, you know, paint as quickly as I could before the light changed, and I came up with a bunch of these and. On a gray paper, kind of on a Canson gray paper, quick and dirty, just get it done, you know. And then I would take photos of the same scene and think to myself, I'm going to use all this stuff at some point. I'm going to use it. I know I will use it. Some of it I used, some of it I didn't. But most of those studies I did on the Camino sold. They're gone, you know. All I have is bad photos of a crappy little painting, you know. But then I use that technique over here, the same technique on some of these pieces, which were some keepers from the Camino. And they're also the black and white gouaches. I love black and white photography. I'm a big fan of photography. And my father was a photographer, and I worked in film, worked on a number of TV shows and movies and things, and I also work as a artistic production manager in entertainment. And so I'm aware of theatrical lighting and all that. So that black and white gouache, I can get those dramatic lightings, you know, like here's the main subject, here's the stuff I really don't want you to see, you know, that kind of stuff.
Because they do seem like storyboards in a way.
Yeah, there is a. I've done a lot of storyboards for cinema and film, and for a couple of TV shows that are in the works right now, and so I feel like I can tell a story, I can design it as though I'm going to shoot it, you know, like I'm the cinematographer, even though I'm not. I don't know the first thing about cinematography, really, you know, but so the black and white thing gets me to that drama of contrast, light-dark contrast, like right away. It doesn't really mean jack diddly squat if that's a yellow shirt on that person right now. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that brown cow is a brown cow. It's just black and white. And then I can figure that out when I get to the final canvases. I can say, man, I really need that guy to be wearing a yellow shirt. You know, that would really help with this patch of flowers over here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can balance that out. And I always said it's a damn good thing I'm not a photographer, because I would get too impatient, you know. And if I did cinema, I could demand the costume department put you in a yellow shirt in that scene. And because that's really going to work well with that red Corvette that's, you know, the bleached out Corvette that's parked over behind the building or something. And I'm a big fan of directors like Michael Mann and what he does, and Ridley Scott. And it's interesting because Ridley Scott and Michael Mann both have photography in common. They were photographers before they ever made their first film, you know. And so my influences in photography show up in these little studies and things. And then from that, I can do the same black and white underneath each one of these paintings is a black and white underpainting. All of these paintings, except for the monoprints, started off as a black and white underpainting. Looked just like a black and white photo, let's say. And then I went in and I tinted it with oil paint, with the gouache and all that. So I retain the drama of lighting, and like in some pieces that are more atmospheric, you know, like the subdued lighting. Yeah. Well, shoot, I mean the whole underpainting was subdued, you know. So I can keep that theme. I don't make a mistake by making something too bright, you know what I mean? Because I want that kind of.
You captured what you saw.
I want that emotional thing,
yeah.
you know, and it's weird how black and white photography, I mean, it's not weird because we know Ansel Adams' work and we know a lot of these people, even Curtis, going back to the origins of black and white. You see how black and white can evoke a mood. It can evoke goodness or badness or evil or angelicness. You know what I'm saying? Like there's black and white can do that. So man, then if you put color on it, how are you going to screw that up? Do you know what I'm saying? If you already achieved it in black and white, you got to be an idiot to screw it up after that. Pardon me, idiots out there watching this. You know. You can't help yourself.
Yeah.
The gene pool was a little thin, I guess. It's okay. I won't blame you.
Last question. It's another question on technique would be when approaching, especially the paintings that you did in gouache. I know Tony was talking a lot about this. He talked about how there's this layering. It almost looks like you're. Well, it is simulated texture because you're actually getting the texture of the pigment itself. But if you didn't know that, unless you're right on top of it, you're looking at it and you can see there's an extreme texture and there's extreme, as you say, drama with the lighting and the way everything's bouncing off each other. So how do you create that with the gouache or with the oil?
Yeah, materials and techniques. You know, that comes from years of screwing it up and then figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I used to mix vinyl spackling, you know, in my paints or whatever. I used to do, I mean, you name it, matte, mediums, everything. Because with the oils and with the gouaches, I'm gonna need the texture. And as you know with gouache has no texture on its own. I could squeeze out a tube of gouache onto a piece of canvas and it will dry in the shape that I squeezed it out at. But you're just painting it, it's always gonna lay flat. It's always gonna draw, it's just like acrylic really, it'll just always be flat. So I had to come up with a means of raising that gouache layers up. I always put texture, this is an old rule that the Greeks came up with. The Greeks said, these were laws that the Greeks came up with that deal with perspective, like aerial perspective, depth of field and all that. And the Greeks said that the front third of a painting or any work of art should contain 2/3 of all texture. And the back 2/3 of the piece should contain only 1/3 of texture. So, and that gives it that dramatic foreground, middle ground, background thing. If you look at all of my paintings, I have a foreground, I have a middle ground, and I have a background. It's good cinema is the same way. And so if you're coming up with a master shot in cinema, you need that. You need those things. It gives you an event, it gives you a sense of place, atmosphere, and all that. So, and I really like my background to be my atmosphere, my deliverer of atmosphere. And what does atmosphere mean? It means temperature, it means wind, it means is it dry, is it humid? You know, atmosphere is what time of day is it? Atmosphere is also that thing we call emotions, spirit or lack of spirit, you know, that kind of thing. So I have my background that does that. And my foreground sets the measurable space. Like, I am how many feet away from my main subject? Can I measure with like visually, can I say I am 10 feet away or I'm 12 feet away from my main subject? And you can see in a lot of these paintings that you can measure how long it's going to take you to get to that middle ground in the piece. Say the middle ground is an old woman washing a building. Let's say the middle ground is a bunch of people sitting at a cafe, at a table, you know, under a sodium light. So that foreground, I need that to be the thing that measures the depth of that painting, you know. And it always drives me nuts when I look at paintings and I have no idea where I am. Like, am I floating over the ground? Am I in some like Disneyland, you know, like is Bambi gonna come running by? I mean, I don't know where I am, you know. And I want you to be able to figure it out, like in my painting, like you can step in there and you know what's to the right and you know what's to the left, meaning you know what I'm not showing you. And so that texture does that. I feel like it does that. It gets the closest to doing that. And so that front third of my painting has actual texture, like you can feel it with your fingers. And it also has what I call implied texture, where I'm saying there's texture with the paint. I'm mimicking it with a brush stroke and with my values and all that. But I'm mimicking on top of actual texture. Let's say like it's a cobblestone street or something. I want you to feel like, yeah, I don't want to fall on that street. I don't want to skin my knee on that gravel or whatever it is. And so that is done with building up of, and sometimes in the oil paintings, it's building up the oils. In the gouache, I use gessos. I use black and white gessos. And I literally like take my worst brush that I own and I just scoop it up and just put it on there because I have my drawing done underneath. So I know where the manhole cover is going to be, you know what I mean? I know where the curve is. And then I take I have different brushes where I've sharpened the end of the brush in a pencil sharpener.
Yeah.
And I've gone in and I've redrawn the cobblestone, you know, and all that stuff. So you'll see that in a lot of these pieces. You won't see any of that texture existing beyond the middle ground to follow that Greek rule that I talked about earlier, you know. So measurable space, measurable space. It's really important to me in my work, you know. Does that help answer your question?
Oh, that was perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
And no, it really does. It, like you were saying, it kind of draws you in, but it also grounds you because you know, like you said earlier, you know where you are, and then you're allowed to peruse the rest.
Yeah, and you know, there are times when let's say I'm doing a painting where I'm looking down at the subject, so there's not really a background. It's just me and then whatever the subject is. I'm like coming in close on it. And then I'll put texture in like the hair. Let's say it's a portrait, the hair or in the shirt or wherever, you know. But most of the time I follow these rules here, you know. I'm like a painting junkie, you know what I mean? I gotta keep upping the dosage, you know what I mean? And so I keep turning the volume up on texture and I keep turning the volume up on atmosphere because I have to convince me, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm not convinced of the piece, then I don't think you will ever be convinced of it because I'm the junkie, do you know what I'm saying? And I gotta turn the volume up on that thing. And it's hard with the monoprints because I can't have the texture. And it's like, you know, what am I going to do? You know. So if I can't have the quality, then I up the quantity, you know. Right. And that's why there's 12 of those things, 12 paintings. So it's part of the reason. But yeah. And you know, a lot of the magazines that write about me, Angel, they're always like, "What's your formula for those gouaches?" You know, like, what the hell do you do? Because they're not behind glass, right? You know. And once I gave my formula away to Artist Magazine. This was back in the late '90s, and I've regretted it ever since because now I see everybody painting that way. Do you know what I'm saying? They're all and I'm not saying that I'm mad because, you know, people now understand how to paint that kind of subject. But for me, I didn't know that I would be giving away the secret that keeps me in business. Do you know what I'm saying? And so as artists, you'll find that there are things that you do that will be your thing, your little thing that whatever you do, don't give it away. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I gotta keep it.
Keep it close and share it with only the best of the best, you know, those who are already doing their own thing, you know. But I was young, and any magazine that came along, I was just like, oh, hell yeah, I'll talk to you about everything, you know. So, too open sometimes.